cash flow from operations is our North Star.
Yeah.
Is the value of a company is basically the value of its discounted future cash flows. And so what we're focused on is maximizing our cash flow from operations, returning value to our investors. You can also do that by paying down debt. If you did nothing else, all else being equal, if you pay down your debt, you're apportioning more of the company's value to your equity holders.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Hey, well, thank you, Fat Joe, and welcome to Run the Numbers, where I interview world-class CFOs, operators, and the investors who fund them on how to get the most out of your company's performance. This podcast is a playbook of sorts for ambitious people in the world of finance, strategy, and operations. Today, my guest is Kevin Kraus, the CFO of publicly traded technology company 8x8. If you've ever called a customer support hotline, there's a good chance they were using 8x8 to help you out. Kevin has done over 14 M&A transactions in his career and has done the post-integration work to know what good looks like. He's also a pro when it comes to setting up deal desks to make sales go faster. More specifically, on this episode, we cover doing customer diligence in M&A transactions, why integration post-M&A should be done by the people within the company functions, not a separate integration team, tactical advice for standing up a deal desk, how he thinks about capital allocation decisions, and how paying down debt is a form of returning capital to shareholders, the value of getting to a no quickly when you are an FP&A team fielding requests from leaders, and how employees who work with you will remember how you made them feel, more so than what you said. Kevin gives a great explanation of why you should hire someone who wants to take your job, and he makes me think about the value of succession planning, something that companies often shy away from discussing. All this and much, much more after a short word from our sponsors. Cash is king. As the CFO of a SaaS company, I know firsthand how important it is to maintain a healthy AR balance. If you can't effectively manage cash, you can't service debt, make payroll, or invest in growing your business. That's why I'm so excited to partner with the sponsor of today's episode, Maxio, the leading billing and financial operations platform for B2B SaaS. Maxio helps top SaaS companies like Chili Piper, Crunchbase, and Stack Overflow get cash in the door faster by automating collections and dunning. Gone are the days of manually chasing down invoices. Join the 2,500 plus subscription businesses using Maxio, formerly SaaS Optics and Chargeify, to eliminate revenue leakage and streamline order to cash. It's never been easier to get paid. Visit maxio.com/run the numbers to supercharge your financial operations in 2024. Not only does requesting a demo using the Run the Numbers link help support this podcast, ya boy, you also receive a 10% discount on your first year with Maxio. Woo! That's maxio.com/run the numbers. That's maxio.com/run the numbers. Okay, serious question for all my accounting pros here today. Are you doing what you were hired to do? What I mean is, do you have time to actually be a business partner, or are you buried in tedious manual tasks just to get your journal entries prepared every month? I know how that feels. Leapfin's here to help with that. Leapfin is accounting automation software that automatically prepares and posts reliable journal entries. And that's just the beginning. High-growth businesses like Reddit, Canva, and SeatGeek choose Leapfin to eliminate manual tasks, accelerate month-end close, and enable accounting leaders like you to provide faster insights that will help your company grow. If you're battling messy transaction data from Stripe, Adyen, Shopify, Apple Pay, and other PSPs, and then battling again to get it all into Netsuite, go to leapfin.com to watch their short product intro video. And if you like what you see, request a 15-minute conversation to learn how accounting automation can help you and your team. Check out leapfin.com today. That's leap like jump, fin like shark. I just made that up. I hope they're okay with it. Leapfin.com. Hey, Kevin, thanks for joining the podcast today.
All right. Thanks, CJ. Appreciate being invited. Glad to be with you.
So, Kevin, to start off, I want to talk a bit about M&A. And you aren't a corp dev person by trade necessarily, but if I have it right, you've been a part of 14 transactions now. That's impressive. How is M&A at tech companies done right, in your opinion, after going through those 14 transactions?
Yeah, sure. It's kind of interesting because I've seen some really successful ones and some not so successful ones. And most of the ones I've done were on the buy side. I did a couple of sales. Actually whole company sales to private equity and things like that, and also some spinoffs I did too. So, but most of it was on the buy side. So, for me, how it's done right is, first of all, you need to get a collective team that's multifunctional. I think some of this stuff is probably pretty obvious to say, but a multifunctional team that can do diligence. Obviously, have a clear program management on your diligence, and don't lose sight of the strategic rationale for the acquisition. A lot of times, companies can get hung up in the next bright shiny object type of situation, and you do want to avoid that. And at the end of the day, it's nice to acquire something that's cool, but you got to acquire something that's going to bring value to the company over the long term. So that is clear to me, having gone through so many. Don't lose sight of the strategic rationale for doing the deal. The other thing is the communication with the target. We use the term target. It's kind of a pretty aggressive term to use, but the target that you're looking at, I think developing a relationship with the leaders in the organization that you're looking to acquire, say if it's a startup in particular, obviously speaking with the founders, the key decision makers, if you're looking at a startup, and even if you're not, if it's a larger entity, get to know the people, spend time with them, visit them in person, and cultivate and develop a relationship so there can be mutual trust. You're going to learn something about their culture. And you're going to learn something about them as people, and they're going to learn something about you and your culture, because the cultural fit has to work. And in addition to not losing sight of the strategic rationale, the culture fit is absolutely critical, because you don't want to have an us versus them attitude or viewpoint or anything like that. All the rest of the things, the diligence, obviously, critically important. Don't gloss over it, particularly customer diligence and back office diligence as well. But I think that there's a lot of the softer side of the diligence matters too.
How do you deal with the customer aspect of it? Because a lot of times you're looking at a target for the ARR it already has. When do you communicate with the customer, and how do you go about it?
So customer diligence is very delicate, obviously. The target company would not necessarily want their customers to know that they're for sale, right? Yeah. So it can be very, very delicate situation. So NDAs would be involved, and you'd have to have a mutual agreement around when is the right time to go out and do any kind of customer diligence. So I've been involved in deals where, and I didn't do the customer diligence myself as the finance person, but we had agreements in place where at the right time, after the LOI is signed and you're farther along in the process, then there's times where you discreetly reach out to the customers to do diligence. And you can do that directly, or you can do that through a third party to keep anonymity in the situation. So sometimes you, as the acquirer, don't necessarily want people to know that you're the interested party for the target. So it can be pretty delicate. You don't want to spook the customers. You don't want to spook the target's customers, and so it's a fine line. And I think each situation is different. I don't think there's a single answer about when to approach the target's customers, but I think done right, it is a very, very effective and critical tool in the diligence process. You kind of want to know if they're going to remain customers, what's their sentiment about the target's service offering, things like that. So it's and sometimes in certain cases you wouldn't do customer diligence. I mean, I've done pre-revenue acquisitions where it wasn't necessary.
And how do you think about the integration process? Do you leave that to a team that does integrations every day, like that's what they do, or should the people who are actually doing the product functions that they're wrapping into work on it?
Yeah, so I think this is I have my opinion, and what I've seen work well is for good, bad, or ugly, the people who actually do the day-to-day jobs are usually the best people to do the integration. So that becomes your second job in the company. And I know that there's huge companies out there that have integration teams and so forth. You can hire consultants in your company to help project manage things if you need that type of support. But I'm a big believer in getting a project management group. That could be a third party if you want, or people who are staffed in your organization to do this if you're a particularly acquisitive company. But the people who do the best at integrating are the people who know how the company operates. So they know for example, in finance, they understand the ERP system, they understand the billing system, they understand provisioning systems, and so forth. So I think that really is very, very helpful, provided you have, and this is obvious, but provided you have the right people doing those jobs in the first place. They have to be someone with good company history, a lot of institutional knowledge. They understand the pitfalls that could happen, and so those are generally the best people to do the integration. The downside is that they've got their day job, right? But I will tell you that in my history, every time I've done an integration, I've done plenty of them at the ground level. That was my night job, and so I think it can happen faster. I think it can happen with fewer mistakes, and you get better at it the more you do it. But it's my belief that the people who are doing the day-to-day work are really the best positioned to make the integration happen most effectively.
I tend to agree with you, Kevin, because the amount of tribal knowledge I think is underestimated when there's an acquisition. That's really what you're onboarding people into, the peculiarities and quirks of how the business functions.
Yeah, the time it takes to teach somebody how your company works, if they're coming in from the outside, you could have done the work yourself. And I think for integrations particularly, speed counts, right? Yeah. Because the last thing you want to do is have your new colleagues, the employees that you bring on board, your new brothers and sisters, for lack of a better phrase, that you're going to be working with. You don't want them to wonder what's going on. So speed counts, getting the gears to mesh together, and the customers that you're bringing on. You don't want them to be in the dark about anything either. So I think speed counts. And also, it is impossible to over-communicate during an integration process. It is absolutely impossible to over-communicate. So I'm not talking about daily stand-ups or anything. You can do that, which is very productive. But reaching out, speaking, if you repeat yourself, all is going to be forgiven. Just communicate. And that is because in the absence of communication, people are going to make up their own stories. And so you got to have a very, very good communications plan, particularly when it comes to people implementation, and integration within the larger entity.
A corp dev guy I used to work with, shout out to Kerry, he was the best. He used to always stress that the time to value for the people you're acquiring is really important, because they're always kind of reaching out their arms. Can I feel the walls around me? Do I know what's going on here? And if you acquired the company primarily for the technical talent or what have you, you don't want them to leave just because they look at you like these guys do not have their stuff together.
Yeah, it defeats the purpose of doing the deal, right? I mean, you want retention. Not only do you want customer retention if it's a revenue producing company, but you also want employee retention. We've done acquisitions in prior companies. I've done an acquisition here in my current company where employee retention was a real big part of it, because you're, especially engineering teams, they're making the products and developing the products, and that it's key to have that. A lot of the technology is obviously in their brains that you want to hold that within the company. So it's a very, very big deal from an employee integration perspective. You want to make them feel comfortable and that they belong.
Yeah. That's awesome. I want to transition to enabling sales teams. And one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you, Kevin, is that you have a deal desk set up at 8x8. And most people might have the gut reaction of deal desk, the people who just slow things down, especially if you're in sales. But in what ways have you structured yours, Kevin, to speed things up?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's we were talking earlier about, we're not the deal prevention desk, right? We're the deal execution desk in commercial operations. So the way, a couple things that we work very closely, obviously, with the sales team. The commercial operations team reports into my org, and I think it works really well because we've done a couple of things. We want to make business operate as frictionless, with the least amount of friction as possible. So a lot of questions that would come in historically would be, okay, can I afford to give this price? That's really what most of the questions are about. Like, can the company afford to do the deal at this price? We know what the list price is. This is, you give permission down to a certain level at certain levels of in the organization. That way it doesn't have to involve the deals desk at all, right? This is normal operations in a company. You have authority limit to this, to that, to the next person, etc. Time it comes to the deals desk, it's maybe an exception basis. So you want to make it so the fewest amount of deals have to touch the deals desk. As interesting as that sounds,
Yeah,
you want to enable people to, again, give them the authority, set up the rules so they can make their own decisions. And no company is perfect at this, by the way, but you want to make it so they can do business on their own. You give them a set of parameters. They don't have to put an email into you, call up the deals desk, ask for permission, get the answer the next day. That just slows things down. So give them a set of parameters of what they can approve things. Secondly, what we do here in my current company is we actually have created, and I'll credit this to the leader of our commercial ops team. She's terrific. We created a tool, a pricing tool. It's very simple front end. It's basically a fancy Excel spreadsheet, but it's got a very easy to use front end, and you put your parameters in, and it gives you a red light, green light, and that way you can, as a salesperson, put in your parameters, and then it spits out an answer, go, no go. That saves an email. Because ultimately they'd have to give all that information anyway. So you might as well just type in 4 or 5 things into the front of a spreadsheet and see if it works. That helps to speed things up either. Lowers the amount of email, lowers the amount of phone calls. So those are the couple of things that operationally we do. Give people authority and give them a tool to get an answer. Now, some of the other things that we look at also is, how can we help run promotions? This is about giving authority. Okay, we'll run a promotion or a spiff or a program for 6 months, a year, 3 months. This is obviously designed to grease the skids, if you will, on deals. Everybody does it. And we try to get those out of the way up front, the beginning of a quarter, beginning of a half year, beginning of a year, to set it up so we've got a program in place that we can bake into anything that we do, the deal. It's part of like the tool that I just described with the getting a yes, no. All these things are designed so people know in advance what they could do to stimulate the sale and to make this as frictionless as possible. So that's kind of how I approach things. And the whole idea is about how to get to a yes, not how to get to a no. The default is not no. The default should be, if it's a no, it's a not yet. Let's figure it out. And we try to get to yes. That's the key. And it really is helpful in developing your relationship with the sales team members, because then they'll come to you. They'll come to you for more stuff. They'll trust you.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Mercury knows your financial operations are complex. Founders and finance teams have to pull together different tools, reconcile transactions from different sources, and struggle to get accurate answers. With Mercury, you can simplify your operations with banking and software that power your critical financial workflows, all within the one thing every business needs, a bank account. And with new bill pay and accounting capabilities, you can pay bills faster, stay in control of company spend, and speed up reconciliation. Apply in minutes at Mercury.com and join over 200,000, ambitious startups that trust Mercury to provide the precision, control, and focus they need to transform their financial workflows so they can perform at their best. Mercury, the art of simplified finances. Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided by Choice Financial Group and Evolve Bank and Trust. Members FDIC. I'm getting good at that voice. Quick math. The less your business spends on operations, on multiple systems, on delivering your product or service, the more margin you have and the more money you keep. That's the goal, isn't it? But with higher expenses on materials, employees, distribution, and borrowing, everything costs more. Yesterday's price is not today's price. So to reduce costs and headaches, smart businesses are graduating to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one platform and one source of truth. With NetSuite, you reduce IT costs because NetSuite lives in the cloud with no hardware required. Access from anywhere. You cut the cost of maintaining multiple systems because you've got one unified business management suite. You improve efficiency by bringing all your major business processes into one platform, slashing manual tasks and errors. Over 37,000 companies, wow, that's a lot of customers, have already made the move. So do the math. See how you'll profit with NetSuite. And back by popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/metrics. That is netsuite.com/metrics. Ooh, yeah, you know your boy loves some metrics. That's netsuite.com/metrics. Please do it, guys. I really need this. I want to flag for the benefit of listeners that the key is to actually not let deals hit the deal desk. It's to prevent them ahead of time.
I think so. And it's not because I don't like the deals desk. The deals desk is there as a necessary control mechanism for exception cases. And the rest of the time, the deal desk should be really working with the team is to help speed things along.
Yeah.
Right. If there's quotations, make your quotations process as fast as possible and as self-serve as possible. Those are the kinds of things that the deals desk can help with. It's a commercial operations desk. It's not just let me audit this deal to see if it makes enough profit. It's commercially, how can we operate to make things as frictionless as possible?
Kevin, you had mentioned price as the core reason why things land on the deal desk. Can you speak to payment terms?
Sure. I mean, price is one of the most popular reasons why things might hit a deal desk for discussion, or at least as an exception that would maybe bubble up to me.
Sure.
Right? So a price. And also other things like time to ramp, right? Like if you're a subscription-based business like we are, if the customer signs up for a peak amount of service, but how long does it take to get us there? Those are the kinds of things that are core issues that, sometimes need to be discussed if the customer has a longer ramp cycle or something like that. So those are price and that are really the most common. In terms of payment terms, look, typically in the SaaS world, you buy a subscription for something, it's a 1-year prepay, right?
Yeah.
So it's just the way it is. In our business, where it's it's kind of annual prepay should be the default. A lot of the customers will sign up for a year, 2 years, 5 years, but they'll pay month to month. Most of the customers would pay month to month in our business, but we do have plenty of customers who do annual prepay, which is what the software is. But we're kind of there's some telecom related influences in our business.
Sure.
And so it's not like you're buying Salesforce or something like that. You're buying a communication system.
So you as a CFO get a deal, I guess, on your desk, and there's a request around changing the pricing and then changing the payment terms. What would you rather lean on and give some leadway on?
Well, I think I would rather get it all depends, right? But I mean, payment terms, again, are not a big issue for us. Like there's nobody's asking to pay in arrears or, I'll pay, give me the service now and I'll pay at the end of the year. So that doesn't really come up that much for us, if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
It's not really a big issue. It's more of a in different regions, you could have 30-day terms in the U.S., you could have 45-day terms somewhere else, you can have 60-day terms in parts of Asia, for example. So that's just normal and customary. I don't get too many of those, really. That's generally an indication, we do our diligence on the customer creditworthiness and things like that, but we don't get too many payment terms issues that come up. So I would have to say, to answer your question, honestly, it would be, it's all, I'd probably
it's all relative.
I'd focus more on the price than anything. And really, for me, the deals we like to look at in terms of the attractiveness of the deal and the ability to be more price flexible would be, okay, what is our upsell potential for this customer,
okay.
right? So you could maybe be a little bit more flexible on pricing at the low end of your product line range if you have a very good sense of how this customer is going to grow with you over time, and perhaps buy more of the same or buy other products and services that you offer. So that factors into the decision making as well. I mean, if you're dealing with a mom and pop shop that just wants low end unified communications, that's fine, and you can set that up and do whatever you need to do to get that deal. But like other customers that are big customers that maybe want to start out small, and maybe you could be a little bit more flexible because you're going to grow and you're going to make your money in the longer term with that customer as they grow with you.
Yeah. One more question related to Deal Desk, and then we can move on to some other fascinating stuff. But can you speak to the significance of ramp deals? I feel like those are really prevalent in kind of the COVID days for a lot of software companies, and they still exist today, but perhaps they're under more scrutiny than they were before.
Well, ramp deals are pretty common. Particularly in our market, where you have think about a customer, they're on a collaboration tool like Zoom or Microsoft Teams as an example. When you buy those products, you don't instantly deploy 50,000 of them at once, right? It takes a while. Like if you have a retail customer that has multiple locations, you're dealing with a regional bank. You're dealing with, any kind of company that deploys the IT team, deploys it over time, and they do it in a measured and controlled process. That's the ramp. So if somebody buys 10,000 seats of something, they may take 6 months to ramp all those 10,000 licenses. So that is important for two things. Number one, you got to make sure that the product is working as advertised on the customer side. They want to make sure that the product is working as designed, as advertised. They work out the bugs in their own systems when they deploy, and then they ramp and over time. It just takes a bit of time. So those the significance of that is how quickly can you get time to value for the customer. So the faster they can deploy, and they may be taking another system out and putting yours in, for example, right? So the ramp time in that context from a user experience is pretty important. So hopefully I've answered that.
Yeah, totally. And I love how you honed in on the different reasons, which are pretty logical for why a customer would need to ramp. Like if you were going after, let's say, a retail customer, like an LL Bean that may have 10 different customer support centers and you're rolling out software, they're not going to do them all overnight. And if they're ripping and replacing something that was there before, that's even more time to value that it'll take. I think like ramp has been thought of in just the last year as companies buying ahead because they know their headcount's going to increase. But then kind of when the tide rolled out and people weren't hiring as many people, they looked at it and said, oh, maybe I shouldn't have signed up for this ramp deal that went so high.
Yeah. And look at there are some companies out there, right? Like we've had layoffs in the world in the last 6 months or so where, at renewal, you can get some downsizing. It's possible. Right? You can get some downsizing. A company says, hey, I know I bought 5,000 seats, but now I only need, 4,500, right? Because we have fewer people in the company or whatever. So that's something that can happen. And then, I think that there might have been, like to your point, I think there could be remote work really stimulated the need as well, right? So it's like, okay, back to the office. Does that mean that people are, going to change their licensees or whatever? I don't know. I'm in the office today, and I'm using a collaboration tool. We talk to, there's a whole different, there's a whole bunch of reasons why things ramp up, and particularly in contact center. Actually, if you think about contact center, you want to be really careful about the experience that your customer has. So our contact center, right? We sell it to our customers, so our customers' customers have the best experience possible. And so what we're really doing is we're creating a product that our customers' customers are using as well. And so making sure that that is working the proper way for the customer's customer is very, very important, because that's their reputation as well as ours, right?
Yeah.
We have a reputational issue with our customers, and they have a reputational issue with their customers. So it's very deliberate when you ramp something up, particularly like in a contact center environment.
Customers. It's very meta, Kevin. I like that.
Well, yeah, that's what it's about. CX, right? Customer experience. And we always, and everybody, not just a company like ours, everybody needs to be thinking about their customer's customer.
Yeah. I love that. I'm going to take it back to where I work.
I didn't invent it, right? That idea has been around for way longer than I have. But if you keep your focus on your customer's customer, you ought to be on the right path.
Kevin, I want to move on to a topic that I know you're especially passionate about, and that's resource allocation decisions. And so before we started, you told me about a book you read. It's called The Outsiders. Can you tell the audience a little bit about the book and how it's influenced how you think about capital allocation decisions as a CFO?
Yeah, and it's about, it's a great, in fact, I brought it with me. Here we go, a little plug.
Oh, look at that.
I'm not making any money on this by showing it, but this is a book from the author is William Thorndike, and there's it's a quick read. It's about 200 pages. Anyway, I got introduced to this book by our CEO, Sam Wilson, and it's a great book. It's a story. It's basically about non-conventional ways that CEOs thought about adding value to their shareholders, and a lot of these CEOs, and these are CEOs from the 60s all the way into the 2000s.
Yeah, so not necessarily tech companies.
No, not necessarily tech companies. And a common theme is, everybody's focused on revenue growth. These companies and the people featured in this book were focused on per share metrics, for example. They did a lot of share buybacks, and they looked at things in different ways. So I highly recommend people taking a look at that book. And it turned out like the best people who developed a lot of shareholder value did a lot of different and unique things. So check out the book. Capital allocation, though, but getting back to how we think about it in our our company. So in our particular case, what we are focused on are, again, also per share metrics. Cash flow from operations is our North Star.
Yeah.
Is the value of a company is basically the value of its discounted future cash flows. And so what we're focused on is maximizing our cash flow from operations, returning value to our investors. You can also do that by paying down debt. If you did nothing else, all else being equal, if you pay down your debt, you're apportioning more of the company's value to your equity holders. Okay, because the debt holders are owning less of the company in effect, or the enterprise value, apportion more of your enterprise value. So that is our focus as a company. We've publicly stated that. So the way we look at it is, pay down the debt, reduces your interest expense, which then improves your cash flow from operations, and it's a virtuous cycle.
Right.
So generate the cash flow from operations and operate efficiently. A lot of the people in this book, they were focused on efficient operations, because that's what the market really rewards. The market doesn't necessarily reward growth at all costs. The market rewards efficient growth, revenue growth that can drop down profit and cash flow to the bottom line. So efficiency in everything we do is key. And we've done a lot in that area as a company. And I learned a lot about sales and marketing efficiency, particularly in the last several years of my career. And it's super important. So your go-to-market strategies, the type of people you have, your sales playbooks, how you do your marketing pipe gen, all those things, it plays a huge role into efficiencies. So, how it wraps itself into capital structure is, I like operating it, in a more debt-free manner, because it gives you greater flexibility. You can have debt, for doing things like strategic or opportunistic M&A. So people borrow to make stock buybacks, right?
Yeah.
Or historically, when interest rates were a lot less, maybe not as much in these days. But so I think that for us, the fortress balance sheet concept is a very, very low leveraged balance sheet.
Or if you're Michael Saylor from Micro Solutions, you can borrow to buy Bitcoin, but I wouldn't encourage anyone to do that.
No. Yeah, so it's that's something that we're doing pretty well right here in our company today.
Kevin, as a CFO, how do you make the decision? You have an incremental dollar of free cash flow to either repurchase shares or buy back debt. What goes through your head?
So technically it would be the yield and your WACC has to play a role, but for us right now, it's we have a piece of debt that's high interest rate debt. We have debt that is not maturing for a while, the high interest rate. So we choose to prepay the debt. So what goes through my head is more often than not getting the balance sheet delevered, then ultimately using that cash flow in the future to then do some buybacks later. But every company has a different circumstance. For us, it's we've publicly stated take a look at the debt first. So yeah, a lot of it for me is cash flow and what it does to the cash flow and how expensive your debt is. So those are the types of things that go through my mind.
I was hanging out with a friend over the weekend. He's a private wealth manager, and I was telling him, "Oh yeah, I just locked in an interest rate because we're moving to a new house." And I was kind of moaning and groaning that it was 6.875, I think, and I was like, "Oh, this is horrible compared to the rate I got a couple of years ago." And he said to me, "Well, as you make money from your job, you can kind of think about that mortgage rate as your personal hurdle rate for capital allocation decisions." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like, "Well, if you have an opportunity to invest in something that's 5%, you would probably say to yourself, you should probably pay down the debt." And so like in that sense, I feel like I'm kind of CFO of my own household.
Yeah, well, you are, and you should be. I mean, it's opportunity cost. It's interesting that you bring up the 6-point-something% and people moaning about it. When I was early in my career, I had a friend who got a loan at like 6.35 or something. This is a long time ago. Oh man, we were like high-fiving that person.
Really?
For getting such an awesome rate. Oh yeah, rates were like 7, 8, 8% before, and they were coming down. And this is like maybe in the early to mid 90s time frame, and it was people were psyched. It's like 6%. They were like awesome, and so I think we've gotten used to these very low kind of artificially low interest rates in our economy for a while, but 6% for a mortgage is not abnormal for a lot of
historically
people.
Speaking, I guess I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah. So I think it's good though that your acquaintance said, think about it from an opportunity cost point of view. What would you rather do with your incremental dollar? What's the ROI on it?
Kevin, I want to talk about the qualities of great finance teams because you've ran some good ones. And you told me you operate your FP&A teams around the, quote, one throat to choke philosophy, which I love, and I also do the same. Can you unpack how that works in terms of staffing and alignment throughout the org?
Sure. I think, I come from, I would say a fairly decent amount of my career was spent in FP&A. The whole philosophy is about how to be a good service provider to your internal customers. So, for example, you'll have the sales leader and the sales leadership team. You'll have the marketing and marketing leadership, the R&D, et cetera. That's how many of the companies I've worked in operated that way. And then those people report to the CEO. So I'm not going to get into matrix managements and so forth like huge companies, but you can think about it in divisions as well. I like to have the FP&A team organized around, like you said, this one throat to choke model so that it makes it easier for the leaders. So the sales leader goes to their key finance contact for anything, any problem. You don't say if it's problem A, you go to that guy. If it's problem B, you go to that person over there. And if it's problem type C, you go to that person over there. That's irritating and confusing. You got to keep things simple if you can. And it does a couple things. It makes doing business internally easier. It's less frustrating for the leader because they don't have to remember who to go to for problem types A, B, or C. And number three, and probably most importantly, it helps develop a trusting and productive relationship between the functional leader and that finance person. And you can't underestimate the value of that last point. I know the FP&A people, anybody in finance has to remain objective and independent, but I think it benefits the finance person because they learn more about their function, and it helps the leader of that function because they understand a bit more about the issues that the finance team care about that affect that team. And ultimately, what ends up happening in many, many cases, it does, that finance person becomes an extended member of the functional team. They get invited to the staff meetings. They participate. And this can happen anywhere, HR, IT, it can happen anywhere. So you become a valued member of the team. And I know it sounds cliche, but I really believe in it. So again, it's all about operational efficiency and making business easier to do. So I think that's a method that I've employed. It's a method I've been in before, and I think it works.
It is super irritating when you go to someone like, hey, I need help with this thing. They're like, oh, no, you go to Chad over there. It's like, I don't care who I have to go to. Can you just help me with this? You have to think about the customer of your customer, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that, and there are customers, right? The finance team's job, I mean, there's the compliance, the reporting, all those things are super important and absolutely critical. But internally in FP&A, your job is to make business happen as efficiently as possible. And if you're going to get to a no quickly. Yeah. Don't waste anybody's time. Don't say, well, I got to ask for these 4 other people and this. In big companies, yeah, that could happen. Like, well, I got to go through the whole channel and chain. I try to keep it simple, where people have the authority to approve things up to, if they want to buy things, it doesn't even hit my desk.
There is something to be said about a quick no, like a quick and painless no. Don't belabor the point.
Or a quick and painful no. It's better than a drawn out painful no,
rip the Band-Aid off.
Exactly. So I think that, and that's respect.
Yeah, right? That is being respectful to give somebody a direct answer. And I think that's lost on a lot of FP&A people, where instead of, just saying no, they kind of dither and they say, let me run it up the chain, or let me talk to this person or that person. But if you delay it for 2 more weeks, that's actually more painful.
Exactly. And then you don't want to say no prematurely either. If you got some diligence to do internally, you can absolutely do that. You do your job, you get the answer quickly, and you work closely with that person. I mean, no shouldn't be the first gut reaction. Again, I think the idea here is find a way to get to yes in a responsible way.
Kevin, what qualities do you think separate the good CFOs from the great ones?
I think, look, for me, it's, there's technical competence. There's a lot of technically competent people out there. They're just brilliant people. They do a great job, maybe enhancing value, and all those things are important and necessary. But I think that the standout items are empathy for people, make people feel good about what they're doing in their jobs, say thank you. And because I believe at the end of the day, or at the end of your career, how people felt about working with you is what they're going to remember. They're not going to remember some great acquisition you did or some awesome thing you did for the stock price, or maybe they will, depending on how much money they made. But they're going to remember what it felt like to work with you. And so that, to me, separates people. There are people who have hired me and they brought me to another company, and I went there with them because I thought they were great people. And that matters. And I think that's the most important thing. And the other thing is, I would say that embrace continuous learning. I think great CFOs, or great any professional, not just CFOs, embrace continuous learning. They are not afraid to say, I don't know. And they ask for help from other peers, peers within the company or other functions. So I think embracing continuous learning is for not just for yourself, but for people on your team. Give people a development plan. Give people the opportunity to have a learning plan. Because I always felt that, my career was not about, I want to be a senior manager by the time I was X years old, and then I want to be a director, and then a senior director, a VP. My career was like, let me learn as much as I can on this job. And then I'll go do something else. I'll do a rotation assignment. I'll do something else. And I think if you have a learning plan, your career kind of takes care of itself in certain ways. I mean, yeah, you got to be aggressive about certain things, but I think if you have a learning plan and a discipline about your learning plan, that will just kind of help your career. So I think that great CFOs should provide the opportunity for people to learn and have a learning plan. And then finally, surround yourself with excellence. Have people smarter than you around you and who are better than you. And I think, the way I look at it is like A players hire other A players or A plus players. B's hire C's, C's hire D's, and D's hire failures. Okay? So just surround yourself with excellence, and you will be rewarded in a whole bunch of ways.
I've heard the phrase before, hire somebody that wants to take your job. How do you square that in your head of hiring really smart, ambitious people? How do you balance hiring people with a lot of ambition with also people who are patient enough to learn and have empathy?
I think that there are things that you can teach, super smart, ambitious people, right? You can teach them patience, right? You want to hold them back, but I think that the more I thought I knew, the more I realized how little I actually did know. And the older I get, the more I realize how much I don't know. So I think that I don't have a problem hiring somebody smarter than me, and I love it. Because they're, especially if they're smart and ambitious, right? Yeah. Because at the end of the day, one of the things I didn't mention earlier was I always said, how am I going to work myself out of this job? Not because I didn't want the job. I want to make myself obsolete through making something so efficient that I'm not needed anymore in that job, but I'll be needed for another job. So, I love people who are ambitious, but they also have to be reasonably patient because they still have a lot to learn.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem. I don't have an intellectual problem with somebody who is ambitious and aggressive. I'm not worried about somebody coming in and wanting my job. It's great if they want my job. Right? I look, because part of your job is succession planning, right?
True.
So
yeah.
You can't just say, "Oh, I'm the boss and I'm going to be the boss forever." I get rated as a leader in the company based upon the kind of succession plan that I can show my colleagues and the board. That's part of your job because that makes your company a sustainable company.
Sure.
And you have to be able to understand succession planning. And so you want people who are aggressive and want to move up because that helps the company ultimately.
That was well said. I really like how you brought the succession planning element into it. I think it's glossed over at a lot of companies.
Now, I understand why it is because everybody has to be ready for the next emergency. But your goal is to not have a continuous string of emergencies. And your goal is not to have somebody who quits, not just at the C level, but somebody who quits and then you don't know who that replacement could be. You got to have people. Sometimes you don't have the luxury, right? You don't have the luxury to have a 100% backup plan. You can't have two people in every job. It's just not affordable. But you have to be able to understand about, okay, who the successor is. What does that look like? What is the plan? How do you develop those people? So you actually want good, ambitious people who want to move up.
Kevin, maybe a stupid question. What does a succession plan look like on paper? Are we talking about a depth chart with quarterbacks here, or is it just a description of the type of role without the person's name, or the type of person you'd want to hire for it?
I think a lot of it, the ones I've been involved with are actual names in the organization. And if your successor isn't in the organization today, what are you going to do about that? Are you going to develop somebody? Are you going to have to hire someone on the outside? It's really a way to force people in the positions to make them think about life in the company without them.
Mm.
And so it's your obligation and responsibility to make sure that the company can operate without you.
I think that is the mark of a really good leader, that if they did disappear, the company could keep going on, which is kind of counterintuitive to say, because if they're a great leader, they bring greatness to the company, but also you want the organization to be its own living and breathing thing.
Yeah, well, confident people are not afraid of having a succession planning discussion.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Kevin, I'm going to take you into what we call our long ass lightning round. So the first question, we're all human. What's an example of something you've screwed up on the job before?
Okay. Well, I've screwed up plenty of times. And I'll give an example. Okay. Several companies ago, I actually had an issue where I didn't fully understand the comp structure in our sales team.
Oh, I've been there.
And we had annual plans, and so of course, as a responsible person for forecasting the expense, this is for like sales commissions, I did not fully understand the potential for this expense to inflect.
Did you break the bank?
I didn't break the bank, but we clearly did not forecast the exponential ramp that ensued. And so that was an example where, boy, did I feel like a complete imbecile when it happened. Now, on the one hand, it was great for the company because that meant we were doing really good business.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I looked like a complete fool because I didn't really understand what the potential was for that expense line item. So it was an embarrassing situation. It elevated to the point of the CEO and CFO, what happened here? And that was a great learning experience with me. One of the ways around that is to have, don't have a full annual plan. You can have half-year plans or quarterly plans or whatever. You can still do accelerators, but it mitigates the risk. So there are ways around that while mitigating the risk while still well compensating your sales team members. Just so I can qualify that statement in case anybody in a sales group is listening in here. But so it's not a way to shortchange the sales team, but there's ways to mitigate risk. That was an example that was particularly embarrassing for me, I would have to say. I had another example of I didn't fully comprehend a certain contractual arrangement with take or pay services, and that was like kind of blew up into a little bit of an expense fiasco as well. So look, I've made my fair share of mistakes, but it was they were all learning, and I survived them, and it was certainly a learning thing. And just make sure you don't make the same mistake twice.
Yeah. If you could tell your younger self something, knowing what you know today, what would you tell him?
The joking answer I say is, hey, go out to Silicon Valley and look up this startup called Google. But for me, I would say that I probably should have taken myself a little less seriously early on in the career. I was probably more pessimistic as a younger professional than I should have been. I actually had this one guy who's a very senior guy in a very large company I worked at, who brought me into his office and told me, hey, he said, Kevin, I think you have a lot of talent, but when I ask you for something, you very quickly say why it's hard to do or difficult, and then you go do it. And so I thank this guy who's long retired, but he's a very, very senior person in business, a very successful guy. And I really appreciated what he told me. And this was a long time ago. I'm grateful for that. So he gave me the advice that I probably should tell myself as a younger person. So I was lucky that I had that guy in my life at that time, because he gave me really great advice about attitude. It was about attitude. I was very, very serious about the job, and I was very, very serious about doing a good job. But I could have been maybe a little bit more lighthearted at the time. Yeah. And I try to remind myself that now. I don't know.
I think all finance people do.
Yeah, it's probably part of it's in the finance DNA. But I think, I like having a good time at work and having fun and accomplishing things. But I think you could balance. I probably should have balanced it a little bit more when I was earlier in my earliest in my career.
Yeah. So taking risks, being more positive, and showing more confidence. I think those are all really good ones.
Yeah. And I did take risks. Very early on, I took a risk. I left a company, took a pay cut, joined a startup. A year later, we got bought for over $1 billion. Wow. So that was I had no problem with the risk taking, for sure. And I just wish I did it earlier.
Yeah.
Like the Google thing I just mentioned.
What were you saying about the Google thing? Reminded me of Back to the Future, where he goes and gets the sports betting book and then brings it back.
Yeah, I know, yeah. But it's it's interesting how it's just kind of seemingly random, in startup land, but it's fun too. So you learn a ton. Whether your company succeeds or fails, you're still going to learn a lot.
Right. You're still stepping up to the plate to take a swing.
Exactly.
Kevin, can you walk me through your finance software stack? What are you using to get the job done today?
For our ERP system, it's NetSuite. We also have a little bit of SAP in a division, but it's basically ERP is NetSuite. That's Oracle NetSuite. Budgeting and forecasting tool is Workday Adaptive Planning. That in combination with NetSuite is a pretty popular combo. We use Avalara for tax, indirect taxes. And that's a pretty recent implementation for us because we were on another tax software tool. We have Anaplan for our sales team commissions, which is relatively new. It was a bunch of spreadsheets before. And we implemented recently a new T&E system, Navan, for travel and expense reporting, which we have good experience with that. The user experience is much better than the previous tool we had. We do Coupa for procurement, which was a fantastic improvement, and we did that probably 3+ years ago. And then ADP for payroll in the U.S. And then we have another service provider that handles international called Papaya that we're implementing that in 13 countries or something like that. So that's our basic IT stack for finance. And
that's accounting. A good stack. Very thorough. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. So a lot of work. We have a lot of good people that help implement that. We have a good IT team that helps us run those tools. So, but automation is a focus for us. I mean, we have to do things just like every company more efficiently. We are G&A after all, and
strategic G&A, strategic.
Yeah, and while strategic G&A is very important, it's you still want to do things to help minimize the cost of your G&A groups if you can.
Speaking of cost, last one I got for you. What's the craziest thing you've ever had someone try to expense?
There is something that comes to mind which I cannot discuss in polite company, but I did have there's somebody who thought that expensing door dashes to their house during the pandemic was an appropriate use of company funds, but not too bad. Fortunately, in all of my companies, we tended to be upfront about the policy, and there's so many good, ways to communicate to people with policies and so forth that it's not generally a difficult thing to do. But your normal things that come up are flight classes. Somebody thinks they should fly business class, and from a 200-mile flight and things like that. But that's pretty easy to kind of rectify. But there are some things back in the day that were pretty interesting. Again, that I won't describe what they were.
You can use your own imagination. I was talking to somebody recently who works for, I won't use the name, a large conglomerate, and because they don't want any liability for like workman's comp and the like, if it's a flight over 4 hours, they have to book first class. And so this person was telling me that he was traveling somewhere where the flight out was 3 hours and 50 minutes. So he had to book coach, and then the flight back, because he was going against the wind.
Headwinds, tailwinds.
Headwinds is 10 minutes longer, and he was required to book it separately as first class. So first world problems.
Well, that sounds like a policy that's in need of improvement.
Yeah.
Because it's just like if you don't want to have your people have to worry about, okay, I have to think about headwinds versus tailwinds in my flights, and
I'll do it if it gets me in first class. I don't care.
Yeah, and I've never been in a company that forced people to fly first class.
Me either.
That's interesting.
It's a new one. Kevin, thanks so much for joining me. I had a blast.
Yeah, thank you, CJ. I'm happy to do it. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about this stuff. I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, LOL. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.